My medals are stored in a safe. Some people like to put them in shadow boxes. It's like those frames with the big glass that you stick on the wall and you can show your things to everybody. Mine are in a safe. Swipe or no swiping. Don't touch them. They're hiding.
Welcome to Most Likely To, a podcast presented by Donors Choose. If you can see it, you can be it. You guys, I am so excited to welcome U.S. Olympic gymnast Laurie Hernandez to the show. Laurie is a second-generation American, making her the first U.S.-born Latina to make the team since 1984. Laurie won a gold and silver medal at the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. She's a two-time New York Times best-selling author, a Mirrorball winner on Dancing with the Stars with fans all over the globe, a longtime KPMG Learning Ambassador, and she's now a junior at the NYU Tisch School of Arts. Laurie is a fierce advocate for the importance of mental health and travels the country speaking to the next generation about following their dreams. On Most Likely To, it's Laurie Hernandez. This episode of Most Likely To is sponsored by KPMG. So let's start at the very beginning. What did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, initially, I thought I wanted to maybe be an astronaut. I didn't know what that entailed. I was 5, and that was before I started homeschooling. But there was always a part of me that wanted to do something big. And as a kid, you know, that you, of course, want to shoot for the stars. And so in my head, I just thought, well, maybe I'll go be an astronaut, or maybe I'll go. And then I just was constantly flipping in the house. And I remember watching TV and seeing gymnasts. And I just didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that was something that human beings could do. And I remember feeling so excited, pointing to the screen and looking at my mom and saying, "Hey, Mom, I want to do what these girls are doing. I think I could do that." And she said, "Okay." And she put me in because she was a little bit nervous. Neither of my siblings had wanted to do gymnastics. And I stuck with that.
Wow. So at a really young age, you were 5 and you saw this. What was your earliest memory of actually doing gymnastics?
One of my earliest memories, I'd say, is probably trying to learn my back handspring. I do remember like my coach holding my back and saying, "Just swing your arms and jump. I'll throw you over. Just swing your arms." And I didn't want to go backwards because, you know, going backwards, that's terrifying.
Scary,
How do you visualize that if you've never done it before? It's not really something that you can feel comfortable with until you do it 1,000 times. And then all of a sudden your body starts getting that muscle memory and you get the hang of it. So that's one of my earliest memories, is just learning how to be comfortable going backwards.
And was there a moment when you were like, oh, wow, I'm actually kind of good at this gymnastics thing? Like, was there a moment that stands out where you realized that you had some talent?
Yeah, there are a couple moments that stick out to me. I know when I was 8 years old, they had a program called TOPS, which was the Talent Opportunity Program. I don't know if it still exists, but I do remember doing that and getting invited to like this gymnastics camp where they test how strong you are and where your skill level is at. And I remember when they test, you know, your age group throughout the country, they kind of tell you where you rank, and that's how they decide, you know, what groups get split up for this camp. And when I was 8, I came out as like one of the strongest kids in the country, which was crazy. So there's just this really, you know, strong 8-year-old walking around in New Jersey. But it really wasn't until I was about 15 years old in 2015 where I had competed at Elite Nationals. I was a junior that year. You have to be 16 years old or older to be a senior in gymnastics. And I remember my score as a junior. Had we taken that score and put it in the senior level, I would have made national team as a 15-year-old.
Wow.
And so I think that also gave me a lot of faith, knowing that the next year was an Olympic year, I'd be a senior, and knowing, okay, if I can keep up a year before, maybe, you know, while we all start upgrading and getting ready for the Olympics, maybe I can keep up then too. So those are 2 really big moments for me.
To be that young and just realize that you had such potential at a national world level.
It's terrifying.
Really terrifying, yes.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine the composure that you must have had as a 15-year-old to have that realization. I know that you were also homeschooled at a young age in order to be an elite athlete and keep up with everything. What do you remember of that experience, and how did that impact and shape your perspective on education?
Yeah, well, my mom is a social worker and a therapist. So is my sister now. Everyone in my family has kind of followed in her footsteps in some way, shape, or form, mine being mental health advocacy. But then also being KPMG's Learning Ambassador, that's a huge one because I grew up reading books left and right. And because I was homeschooled, My education definitely looked just very different. It was very customized to me, and I would travel sometimes outside of the country to go and compete as a young teenager, which is such a, peculiar life. But my mom was someone who always made me feel so grounded in education, and always, when you're a teenager, like, there's a feeling of, I just want to run off and do the things I want to do. And my mom was constantly like, no, education is important. We have to sit down. We have to do this. Like, this is the most important thing. And she would say it 1,001 times. And anytime I would go and compete internationally, or even if I just had to travel to compete, sometimes my mom would compensate and she'd say, okay, I know you're supposed to write a paper on this thing. Let's go ahead and instead write a paper on the city that you're going to. Tell me about their culture. Tell me about who's there. If we're going to go compete in Japan, which is crazy to say out loud, but okay, you're 13, you're going to go compete in Japan. Tell me about the city that you're going to. What's nearby? What's important to the people there? Like, what is different over there than how we're raised here in New Jersey? And I feel like she just really instilled this essence of let's be curious and let's talk about it. Let's find the words for that curiosity. And then, of course, when it comes to reading books, and I always loved like fiction, sci-fi, fantasy. We had talked about that a little bit before this, but I had always loved that. And it was like when practice would get so stressful and I felt like things were too much, I would dive into my books, and it was my way of not only escaping, but I would get to read about characters that had maybe not necessarily a similar struggle, but they were in a similar headspace as me, and I'd get to watch them come to terms with whatever they were going through, and I could assimilate that. And I got to take that on and feel like, okay, maybe this thing isn't impossible.
We always talk about mirrors and windows in our household. Like, books allow you to either look at yourself in a different way if you share similarities with the protagonist. But if you're reading sci-fi fiction, maybe it's a window into another perspective, and what can you apply from that other world into your life. So that's really great. And it's amazing that your mom was such an intuitive teacher, that she personalized your education to you. And it's so clear that you still are a lifelong learner and have this like curiosity to keep learning. It's amazing. Well, shifting to sports, gymnastics is such a high stress environment to just perform flawlessly in front of millions of eyeballs. It's probably such pressure. And so I'm curious, were there any tactics that you learned over time to center yourself under all those bright lights and the pressure of being watched?
Yeah, I had a lot of performance anxiety as a kid. That was something that I really struggled with. I would do so well in practice, and then I would go and compete, and I would fall on skills that I never had an issue with. It turns out the only thing that I was missing was just paying attention to how my brain worked. Physically, I was 1,000% ready. My body could do anything that I wanted it to. But mentally, when it came to that pressure and the stress, and to how to cope with doubts and with anxieties, I just wasn't really paying attention to what was happening up here. And again, coming back to my mom being a social worker, being able to talk that out with her and say, hey, I don't know what's going on, but before I get on the equipment, like, my body locks up and it feels like I can't move. How do I deal with that? And I remember at first she had told me, well, you have to breathe. And I was like, girl, breathe? Yeah. I'm about to, be upside down for a minute and a half. What do you mean? And it turns out that's exactly what you need to do. And there's all these different breathing techniques that we got to figure out what works for me, what doesn't work for me. I know there's a lot of breathing techniques that are out there, especially on social media right now. And sometimes they'll work, and for certain people, they won't work. For me, what worked, the first one was, and I think this worked especially when I was little, my mom would pretend that my finger was a birthday candle, and she'd say, okay, you have to blow the candle, but you can't blow the candle out. You just have to make it flicker. And by paying attention to my breath, and she had reminded me, okay, when you breathe while you're anxious, you're supposed to focus on the exhale, not just the inhale. And so being able to blow that candle really just reinforced my brain, okay, let's remind it how to breathe, because when we get nervous, it kind of feels like it comes up in the chest. For me, it comes up in the neck. And for gymnastics, we're supposed to be either relaxed, but also holding that strength. And if my breath isn't connected to my body, then that's why my skills were kind of falling all over the place. So the candle method was really nice. I'm 24, so the box breathing method has been one of my favorites. When I'm really anxious, my breath is moving really fast. So sometimes people say, do 4 seconds. I dropped it to 3 because that's just what works for me. So, you inhale for 3 seconds, you hold for 3 seconds, you exhale for 3 seconds, you hold for 3 seconds. And that's something that, whether it's competing in gymnastics or now being a student and having to take a test, that breathing method is always with me.
Wow. I just love your mom. I wish I
Mom rocks.
I wish I could meet her. She sounds so amazing with such
She is.
wisdom. And I had read that she didn't even have a gymnastics background. She just to bring like kind of her intuitive skills as a social worker, as a mom, and bring it to the medium of gymnastics was probably really special.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. What do you do to recover as a professional perfectionist? Is there anything that you say to yourself or do to overcome those tendencies that you have?
Yeah, well, being a perfectionist, being a perfectionist as a gymnast, I really, really wish someone had told me that the odds of reaching that perfection is incredibly low. And the perfection is based by so many different moving parts. If we're talking about, you could even say we're just an aerial on beam. Let's say a front aerial on beam where you go forwards and you're kind of in this arch and it looks really cool. You land one leg at a time. If you pull your head up too early, that's a deduction. If you bend your back leg to land, which naturally everyone kind of does, but if you do that too early, that's a deduction. If your form isn't perfect or your arms look a certain way, that's a deduction. If you wobble, that's a deduction. There's all of these different things. If you don't have enough height, that's a deduction. And the amount of deductions that a judge can take on just a single skill, knowing that, on the balance beam, we've got 1.5 minutes worth of just skills back to back. It can be really heartbreaking to do a routine and to constantly hear that it can just be better. It can always be better. It can always be better. And when I was a teenager, that idea of, things can always be better was fueling me to be the best that I could be. But I never felt satisfied with what I did, knowing that I was one of the best in the world at it. Perfection is a wonderful thing to strive for because it makes us surpass humanly what we think is possible, whether that's mentally, whether that's physically. But it's also really important to accept that not everything will be perfect. It's the strive for perfection that's a wonderful chase, and that makes human beings wonderful. But the release of it's okay if it doesn't reach perfection, it's a balance that only you can find. I'm still figuring that out.
I mean, it seems like you have a lot figured out that most people don't, but I'm curious how all these experiences have led to you becoming a mental health advocate.
Yeah, what's really interesting about mental health advocacy is that I think a lot of mental health advocates don't typically assign that title to themselves. It's something that it's almost like slipping on a banana peel and it's like, oh, this title is now a part of me. What started out for me was just sharing my story of the environment that I had trained in all the way up into the Olympics. It just wasn't one that I believe any kid should be in. And openly talking about that on social media, it just received a lot of traction and it opened up a conversation for what is healthy coaching and what is, pushing someone to their limits in a way that is still encouraging versus pushing someone by kind of tearing them down. What does that look like? And so in opening up about that experience and just how I struggled with that, how I struggled with performance anxiety, how I struggled with just regular anxiety, being someone who's diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and how I'm dealing with that, working through depression when gymnastics just felt like it was so consuming and I didn't know what else I was supposed to be doing or felt like I needed to be doing something but couldn't. And just talking about what that's like, that's kind of where it began. And in doing, whether it's Q&As or podcasts like this or keynote speeches and talking about that experience of, I experienced really heavy burnout on an Olympic year and I quit gymnastics. Nobody knows that. I only did it for 3 days. I thought I really did something there, but I just needed a break. My body and my brain were so tired. And it was one of the first times that I had listened to that. So that's where the mental health advocacy comes in. And the big point that I try to make, but something that I really like to share is that rest is so important. And as Olympians, as athletes, as just people existing, we are taught to kind of burn ourselves out so we can be better. But rest is crucial. The goal is to get to the end, to sustain ourselves. It's not to break ourselves down before we can even get there.
At KPMG, people make the difference. Their dedication to purpose-driven initiatives and technology enablement helps them attract top talent, benefiting their clients and communities, empowering careers, enabling progress, expanding opportunities. It's how they make the difference every day.
Do you have any advice for students who are, in different contexts having a lot of stress, whether it's like a big test or a big performance on stage, and how would you recommend going about overcoming a big challenge and burnout? Yeah.
First thing I would say is just to communicate, to advocate for yourself, and to speak up about it. And I think the entire point out of this is that community is so important. A support system is so important to moving through life. And we're going to have so many different support systems as we get older and as we do sports or as we do different hobbies. We're going to have different units that are in our inner circle, and building that and understanding the importance of that, and that we can't do things alone is we can do things alone, but how much better is it with other people, Mm-hmm. So talk to your friends about it. See if there's someone who can either help you out with some schoolwork or just someone who's a good listening ear. That's the biggest thing. And then at the end of the day, you have to be your biggest advocate for yourself. Sometimes it is putting your foot down and saying, I'm not going to do this assignment now. I'm going to do it early in the morning. Maybe I'm going to wake up early to do this thing. But right now, I need to sit and let my brain zone out. I'm just going to listen to some music. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go spend time with my friends. I'm going to take a massive 4-hour nap. I'm going to do this. Sometimes it's putting your foot down and doing the thing that you want to do, but still figuring out when you can get your work done. And that's a juggle. That's the entire point of school when you're growing up, is to figure out how to manage that. So you'll learn what works for you, but the biggest thing is going for figuring it out. Go for it. Take the time to figure out what routines work for you. Take the time to figure out, are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Do you need time alone, or do you need time with your friends? Are you someone who maybe places a little bit too much time into watching TV and hanging out with friends and scrolling on TikTok? And maybe you have to set those reminders to do your schoolwork. If you're gonna go on TikTok first, honestly, you do that, but it's your responsibility to get your work done. So you get to figure out when that happens, and you do have agency over that. And I think that's important to remember.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Things have changed quite a bit since you started gymnastics, and even before, where I feel like the field of gymnastics was dominated by white women.
Yeah.
How has, being a woman of color and part of the LGBTQ plus community impacted your career?
Yeah, it's representation. It's everything. And it's something that, before we sat down here, that's something we talked about in the school system, and about having that representation in class, what that's like for students and how that inspires us to keep moving forward and to do great things. And I think a lot of my inspiration and a lot of my fuel came from my parents, because in gymnastics, it was primarily white women that were kind of dominating that field. And then, then women of color started to come in, and then trailblazers like Gabby Douglas, obviously Simone Biles, but Gabby going out there and winning the all around, what that did for Black women and women of color and for people of color in general, it was just so exciting, because it's one of us, we're out there. And so of course, everybody's reaching for, where is that representation? Where can I see myself? And I think something my parents did wonderfully was not point out that representation was lacking unless I asked about it, which I don't really remember doing. I do remember pointing to the girls that had curly hair like me and saying, Mom, she's my favorite. And my mom being like, yeah, I know why, but not necessarily opening up that dialogue just yet, because she didn't want me to feel like what I was going after was impossible just because I wasn't seeing it. I fully agree with that. Some people might handle that differently. I think it was the best thing in the world, because to me, my parents, and especially my dad, was saying, yeah, you want it, go get it. That's really big Puerto Rican culture from my parents right there. But if you want it, go get it. That's yours. If this is meant to be, this is yours. But it's up to you to go get it. And I think I really kept that in my head as a kid, and maybe, not seeing Latinas representing the US at the Olympics at such a big level, it wasn't something that hit me until I made the team, really.
Right, because weren't you the first Latina to make the U.S. Olympic team?
And it was, I think, over 30
Right,
years
yeah, right.
or so. And I remember Olympic trials, making the team, going into our press junket area that we had. And a lot of the journalists were saying, hey, you're the first US-born Latina to make a US team in over 30 years. How does that feel? And I was just turned 16.
You're like, oh my gosh.
I don't really know how to answer this.
Yeah.
But the first thing that I felt was pride for my community, for Latinas out there, for all Hispanics to just watch and recognize that the representation does exist. And if it doesn't exist, then we make it happen,
Hello, my name is Lane Diaz from PS 371K, William Rashkis High School in Brooklyn, and I would like to ask you some questions. What is the most surprising thing about winning an Olympic medal, and where do you store your medals?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. Well, I do think this is a known thing, but the medals are very heavy. And that's always fun to think about. I'd say, let's see, that feels about right. If you fill a mug, a nice heavy mug with a bit of water, halfway through with some water, that's about what a medal feels like, which is pretty heavy, and of course it depends what mug you pick. But it's really heavy, and that feeling of dipping your head down and then putting it around your neck and feeling it kind of plop. We would sometimes get a little bit of rugburn from that lanyard that sits around the medal. So that's something that's fun to think about, and that's a pretty cool fact. And my medals are stored in a safe. Some people like to put them in shadow boxes. It's like those frames with the big glass that you stick on the wall and you can show your things to everybody. Mine are in a safe. Swipe or no swiping. Don't touch them. They're hiding. They're playing peekaboo. They come out sometimes if I need to bring them to an event or something. But also if it's a gold medal, so the medals are gold dipped. They're gold plated. So if you rub them enough, sometimes they'll maybe wear off a little bit. So I feel very primal about mine. I like to hide them and make sure nobody touches them. So that way they stay all gold and pristine.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, you were called NBC's breakout star as a commentator for the.
Oh, I haven't heard that
you
one.
haven't heard that?
No.
As being a commentator for the Paris Olympics, and I'm curious, what was it like being on the other side of the mic this time?
It was really different, but different in a good way. I felt really grateful and really lucky that I was able to share the perspective from someone who has trained for those that I'm commentating on, and to talk about those experiences of being out there and of competing in front of so many and on such a massive stage, recognizing the pressure that they're feeling and also understanding the code of points, like we mentioned earlier, how the judges might deduct something. It felt like such an honor to share all that knowledge and to know that even out of retiring from doing gymnastics professionally, that I'd still get to have my foot on the other line, and I'll always have gymnastics as a part of me, and I get to share everything that I learned. So there's a lot of gratitude for that, a lot of joy, and also just a lot of compassion. I feel like something that I wished I saw when I was a kid was just more compassion for the athletes as a young gymnast, and seeing the perfection that's out there, or maybe there's a mistake that happens and hearing, oh, well, this is really gonna cost her, which is true. And I think I've even used that line before, but still doing it with the intent of why am I saying this? This is gonna cost her. Well, here are the stakes, and still now bringing in the numbers to it for audience members who know nothing about gymnastics at an Olympic level to those who know gymnastics literally better than I do, are big gym nerds, like they make the world go round. But how do we bridge that gap, and how do we connect everyone in a place that says, she has worked so hard for this. This is the best routine of her life. Here's why. This is really not a great routine, and here's why. She's still competing at the Olympics. It doesn't mean she's a bad athlete or a bad gymnast, but this routine today was not the day. Here's why. So I felt really like I had a big fun responsibility to share that knowledge and do it in a way that felt inclusive and kind.
You were definitely able to bring in new audiences, it seems like, because of your accessibility and your friendliness and empathy towards the athletes. So it was really amazing to watch you.
Thank you.
And now it seems you are a sophomore at NYU.
Junior.
Oh, junior.
We're so close.
Gosh, you're a junior.
So far.
Oh my gosh, you're so amazing. And tell us what you're studying and what's been your hardest class at NYU so far?
Ooh, so yeah, I'm at NYU Tisch. For the first 2 years of my primary studio training, I was at Stella Adler Studio, and now I'm at Stone Street. So the first 2 years is theater based, and then my next year or two will be TV and film based. And I'm a drama major, so that's acting, which is a lot of fun. I'm having a blast doing it.
Is that your second act, or now it's like maybe your ninth act? But like, is that your career aspiration, is to go into acting?
It is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it is. I'm in a play right now, and I feel so fulfilled, and it's so nice to still have that essence of performance like I had in gymnastics, and carry a little bit of that with me while also opening into a different chapter and recognizing, okay, when I'm out there, I'm actually not myself. I am someone else. I'm perceiving the world in a different way, and I find a lot of joy in that. So yeah, that's what it looks like for me. And I think the hardest class so far has probably been, I had to take a Shakespeare class. And even though it was really difficult, and I hadn't studied Shakespeare in high school, whole homeschool thing probably got in the way of that. So really getting
Your
my
mom
footing.
was like, we're going to steer.
She was like, we're going to make a little left turn. I actually don't know how to read Shakespeare, so we're going to go this way. But then, having teachers who have studied Shakespeare like the back of their hand, and know it like the back of their hand, and want to impart that wisdom that they've learned of whether it's the iambic pentameter, like learning the syllables and the rhythm that goes into Shakespeare, learning that, okay, Shakespeare sometimes might feel like caricatures of characters. They might feel like we're impersonating these jesters and things, but there's a real live human being under there. How do we empathize with them? And I feel like it took me a really long time to get my footing with that, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. But then when I did, it was like, I felt like my whole world opened up, and the language is so rich and beautiful. And Shakespeare, that's its own can of worms. But the language and the art of it itself is really fun to play with. And I definitely have carried a lot of that into just contemporary work that I'm on now.
I feel like that's like a secret super skill of yours, to take something that's obscure or hard to understand and bring it out to the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My mom says the same thing, that I can take complicated things and make them easy. So I'll take it.
Amazing. Yeah. Do you have any, it sounds like your mom for sure, but do you have any mentors in your life who have shaped your career journey, and why is mentorship important to you?
Oh, mentorship is everything. And it's something that, again, going back to being a KPMG Learning Ambassador, it's a conversation that we've had many times about what does it mean to be a mentor and how does that affect those that they're leading. And this whole conversation, I feel like, has been around that representation and why representation matters. So I know I've talked about my mom and my dad a lot. So given that they are already mentors of mine, I would love to look to my agent, Cheryl Shade, who I had been working with her since I was 16. I'm still with her. She was so receptive of conversations like that. Sometimes she would open them up herself and say, is this too much? How are we doing? And at first, I feel like being a professional athlete, it was my job to just receive information and to do the thing. I'm always getting either a critique or something to fix or something to work on or something to do. And it is my job to just take it and run with it. And I felt like Cheryl just gave me a lot of agency and a lot of, what do you want? Where do you want to go next? Do you want to do acting? Do you want to go into writing? And I remember feeling like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't actually know who I am outside of gymnastics. And her kind of just throwing me out there into the world and seeing what stuck. And she was a big reason why I even applied to NYU in the first place, of thinking, okay, I think I want to get into acting. And she thought, it'd be really cool. You should apply for NYU. You want to live in New York. Why not? And I trust her so much to be like, yeah, all right, let's do it. And she's always right.
What an amazing person to have in your life and in your corner. And it sounds like she was helpful in, you shaping your identity as a gymnast and having this identity really anchored in being a gymnast, but helpful in exploring what else is out there and how do I reinvent myself and how do I explore all the things that make me excited and curious.
Exactly. And I remember, especially when it comes to self-discovery and identity, and recognizing the journey of being queer and then telling her and being like, hey, gymnastics has a worldwide platform. The entire world knows me as this one person. I don't know where to start with that. So I'm going to start with you. I want to let you in onto a little bit more of who I am. I don't know where to go with this. And she was like, nice. This is so exciting. Are you nervous? What's going on here? Like, and I just remember being so nervous to just tell her about that, and her just being like, this is so cool. Like, no, this is great. You let me know where you want to go from here. Like, if you want to do anything about it, if you don't want to do anything about it, if you want it to be something that is just personal and stays quiet because it's your choice, not mine. Like, just being so willing to let me guide that ship. I know that there's so many who go through the same thing, and I wish someone in my position had maybe talked about it more, so that when I was a kid, I didn't feel like it was so isolating or like I had to hide it. Otherwise, people would see me differently. And yeah, they do, and whether you like that or not, it's up to you, you know?
Do you feel like that's had an impact on your career at all? Like you
No.
revealing, no. That's amazing.
Yeah. No, I mean, in a sense of like,
positive or negative, I guess.
yeah, definitely positive. I feel like it's the most accepting. And of course, there's such a ways to go. And I've experienced different things, different opinions, negative opinions about it. And it can be really heartbreaking. But when it comes to things like this and keeping that conversation going, or coming to mental health advocacy and what that journey was like, if anything, just open the conversation. And that's all I ever want to do.
You're so amazing. Okay, so
Thanks.
Your jobs have been definitely unconventional. You went from world champion gymnast to competitive dancer on Dancing with the Stars to NBC sports analyst. And so I'm curious, what is one thing that you want to definitely avoid in your future workplace?
Ooh.
And what is one thing that you're looking for in a future workplace?
That's a really, I don't think I've ever had that question before, and that's never happened. I love this. Something that I want to avoid, you know, I think throughout the last 8 years since the Olympics, like I mentioned earlier, we've gotten to try so many new things. And there have definitely been moments where I find myself in a position where instinctually I don't feel like something's the right fit for me, and I go through with it anyways. And then I'm kind of biting my nails through the entire thing, or, you know, calling my mom, being like, Mom, I don't think this was a good idea. Or, you know, whoever's in my corner, hey, I don't really know what to do here, but we're in it, can't get out now. And knowing that it doesn't align with me, that's what I want to avoid. It's not a specific job or a specific thing. If something in me is saying this is not the right fit, or like sometimes this really wonderful thing kind of falls on my lap. I feel like, you know, a lot of that has to do with Cheryl. But truly, sometimes these really wonderful, incredible opportunities come my way, and that instinct flares up of this is not the right fit for you. This is not the direction you want to go. And it's this really cool thing. And yet my skin feels like it's crawling to be willing to say no to that. And then to the flip side of that, sometimes I say no because I'm scared and I don't like change. I am a creature of habit. I like my cozy sweaters, and I like my corner, and I like schedules, and I like my things to be how they are. And sometimes a really wicked opportunity may come, and it may not hold a lot of weight. It may be kind of a throwaway thing, like, hey, there's this little thing. But everything will have to change if we do this little thing. And sometimes my agent will come in and be like, this is the thing. This is the thing. I know it's going to change a lot for you, but this is the thing.
Okay, lightning round. You're going to tell me, I'm going to tell you a phrase.
Okay.
And you're going to tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Okay, so.
I'm scared.
Pop quiz, no. Daily good habit.
Ooh. Making tea in the morning and sitting with it for a few minutes.
Awesome. Daily bad habit.
Scrolling on TikTok right before bed.
Yeah, don't we all?
Yeah.
Something that gives you the ick.
Oh, dear. Where do we start?
Tell me three.
Okay, when people smack their food. Oh, when like a teacher or someone is kind of leading, like one person is leading a group of people and they're talking and everyone's talking over each other. Just listen. They're working so hard. They're
like
up there
that
alone.
too.
Oh, it makes me want to rip my
bothers
hair
me.
out. I'm like,
yes.
Like, you know, and if you are going to talk, just whisper, but like give them the space to command the room. Like, they're up there and it's a really bold thing to do. Like, give them your attention and your energy And if you're not, then at least whisper. And my last ick is literally just, I just don't like mushrooms on things. I don't like it. The texture is weird. The texture is weird. I can't do it. For everyone who says it tastes like nothing, it doesn't, you're a liar.
You sound like my kids. Okay, one item you can't live without.
My headphones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular headphones?
I have nice like noise canceling over the ear headphones.
Okay.
And because I travel and fly a lot, it's like, especially when the plane is roaring, especially when we're taking off, it's nice to not be able to hear too much of that. Mm-hmm. Or on the train, New York trains, so loud, but not with these headphones.
Nice. Best compliment you've ever received?
Ooh, that I was like a cup of warm tea to be around.
Oh, how lovely.
That was really nice.
It's very true.
Thank you.
And favorite mantra?
Favorite mantra? Ooh. Dare I go cheesy and just say, you got this? Right before I competed at the Olympics, I whispered, I got this to myself as a way to pump myself up. And they caught it in 4K, and I turned into a meme.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
You've been able to elevate some causes from mental health to access to learning, and you've done some amazing collaborations. I'm curious, what have been some of your proudest collaborations in this space?
I think being KPMG's Learning Ambassador is huge because not only are they donating millions and millions of books to those who don't have access to them, but my role in it is, again, opening up that conversation. Why is literacy important? Why do books matter? Why is storytelling important? We talk about mentorship a lot. And I feel like KPMG has just allowed me to hold that conversation, and they've given me the stage a bit to talk about those things that are important to me and how I've been affected by them.
Awesome. So to wrap, I would love to hear if you could go back in time and talk to little Laurie and give her some career advice. What advice would you say to her?
Ooh, career advice for little me. To answer the question, I would tell her to follow the things that make her curious, and that there is a very niche job out there waiting for you that holds the thing that you're curious about. And it may take a minute to find it, but I always loved acting and entertainment and performance as a kid, and I never once sat and thought, I guess I'll just be an actor. Like, that never came to mind as a kid. Or I love reading all these stories and I love writing. Then I'll just be an author. Of course you can figure that out later, but as a little kid, I'm doing the things that little me was very curious about. So I tell her to just stay curious and know that you don't have to give up on those things that make you happy and curious. There's a world where you could probably get paid for doing that and have a good time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. You have been just so open and vulnerable and real and fun, and we're just so grateful for you to share your story with all of our listeners. So thank you.
Thank
Times
you.
a million.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks everybody for listening. Have a good day.